welcome back. And now we're on week 2. We're at the main point of the book. It's an exciting chapter. I know you had a lot of homework. Way to go, those of you who did it. Those of you who didn't, well, hopefully the lecture will catch you up and we'll go from there. But I'll remind you of a couple things from chapter 1 before we jump in. Because last week we did Habbakuk 1. But let's begin with prayer, and then we'll jump right in. Father, I just want to thank you for today. I want to thank you for this time. And Lord, as I'm recording this, I just want to pray for those that are studying even now and will be watching this soon. Father, I pray that they will grow in their knowledge of you. That, Lord, they'll be excited about who you are and where we're going, and not be fearful of anything that's going to happen here in this world, but have our mind and our hope fixed on you. Lord, if only we would set aside our kingdom desires here, and maybe we focus on your kingdom and what's to come. Father, help us to grow as we look into chapter 2, that you would be honored and glorified. I pray that my words would not cause anyone to stumble, but my words would be what you want to speak, that they would be encouraging and uplifting to everyone who hears them. I pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, well, let's jump into chapter 2, but before we do, I wanted to cover, just to remind you of a couple things in chapter 1 last week in Habbakuk. Remember in chapter 1 we were seeing that Habbakuk was seeing violence and no justice, and he wanted God to fix it. That was the whole point of the beginning of Habbakuk. And God told him, remember in verse 5, look, go ahead and look in your verse 5. Look among the nations, observe, be astonished, wonder. I'm about to do something in your days you would not believe if I told you. I'm about to send the Chaldeans. Which was overwhelming. It's like that wasn't what Habbakuk had in mind. He had a different idea of what he wanted God to do. And Habbakuk said in verse 13, your eyes are too pure to approve evil. You cannot look on the wickedness with favor. Why do you look with favor on those who deal treacherously? Why are you silent when the wicked swallow up the more righteous than they? And we talked about that last week, of how Habbakuk was ranking sin, and he was saying that they're worse than us. Why are you letting them have favor in light of our pain? And Habbakuk, we talked about, he had a wrong view of a lot of things, but he had a wrong view of God, in that he thought that God should just fix Israel, and also that God shouldn't let the Chaldeans be the one that judges Israel for what they've done. So he was comparing Israel's sin to the Chaldeans' sin, and he was sort of like, he was saying, hey Lord, we worship you. We know the name Yahweh. We read your word. Yes, we're doing violence, and yes, we're not doing justice. We're not following it, but we're a lot better than those Chaldeans who worship idols and don't worship you at all. And it shows how self-righteous he was, that he was saying, hey, we're actually pretty good. He really didn't understand the depth of how wicked all sin is. And I think he also missed the depth of God's grace that comes through. But we'll start to see that today. So he had a wrong view of sin and a wrong view of God. And that's what we want to learn, is we want to say, do I have a wrong view of sin? And many times I do, and a wrong view of God. Because I find myself doing that too. When I sort of go, well, I'm not as bad as those guys. God, why am I having to deal with this difficulty? And why am I being disciplined for this sin? I mean, they all get away with it. And God's just challenging us to really think through who he is and about our sin. So let's jump into chapter 2 of Habbakuk. It starts off with Habbakuk still speaking, And he ends, it's sort of tied to chapter 1. He ends his whole thing that he's been talking about in the chapter 1. And he says to God, I will stand on my guard post and station myself on the rampart. I will keep watch to see what he will speak to me and how I may reply when I am reproved. It's like a military. He's like, I'm going to stand and I'm going to wait and I'm going to watch. And God, I'm waiting for you to talk to me because I know I need to be reproved. Somehow I'm not thinking rightly. Well, this is the first time that I really see Habakkuk, the believer in him. Before he was saying, God, I think you're this way and you're not making sense. And many times we'll find ourselves thinking, God, I think you're this way and this is what should happen. But it's not. So that's when we too, like Habakkuk, need to go to God in prayer and ask God, please help me, show me, reprove me. I want to learn. I want to learn who you are and how I'm supposed to walk in this world in light of what I'm seeing in my eyes. And so this is when Habakkuk, his attitude is right. He's open, he's waiting, he's listening for God. And often that's where we need to be, is in a wait mode and a listening mode and just waiting till God does reveal himself. He will. He won't leave you. He's already there. But sometimes he knows that it's just going to take you a while till you're ready to hear what he has to say. Sometimes I find I'm waiting, but I don't really want to hear what he has to say. I'm waiting for him to fix it like I think he should fix it. And God sometimes comes along and goes, Carol, I'm not going to do it your way. And part of my prayer time is keep wrestling with God and trying to align myself up with God of what he says he'll do and trying to say, teach me more, and searching the scriptures to try to understand and grow my knowledge in him. And that's exactly what Habakkuk is doing here. He's saying, Lord, you know what? I probably am thinking about this wrong, and I'm waiting because this doesn't make sense to me. I'm waiting, and I'm hoping that you'll show me, and I'll learn. And so that's what Habakkuk's saying. Well, the Lord answers him, and he says, record the vision, inscribe it on tablets, that the one who reads it may run. The Lord's answer is, hey, write it down. And that's why we have this right here. Inscribe it on tablets. It's sort of an interesting Hebrew word. Put it on something that's permanent. Inscribe it on rocks that aren't going to go away. That's the whole point here. So he wants to write it down so others can see. And then he says in verse 3, for the vision is yet for the appointed time. It has hastened toward the goal, and it will not fail. Though it tarries, wait for it will certainly come. It will not delay. There's no escaping this, Habakkuk. It's going to happen. God's not going to change his mind. As you studied in your homework in 2 Kings 24, verses 3 and 4, it talked about how God said, because of the sins of Manasseh, I'm not going to forgive, and I'm going to, he's going to send them away to Babylon. It doesn't say Babylon, but it does say that, well, actually it does in 24. But they are going to get judged. So he's telling Habakkuk, wait for it, wait for the judgment, but also, Habakkuk, wait for deliverance. That's true too. Both are true. That I am going to judge, but I'll also deliver. And we know that he put him in slavery and took him to Babylon for 70 years in captivity. And after 70 years, they returned back to the land. So God did deliver. And he delivered Habakkuk in a certain way. But we'll see more of that in chapter 3, what Habakkuk cries out for. But he's saying, Habakkuk, there's nothing you can do. This judgment is coming. Waiting is a hard thing. And I find that in my Christian walk, that waiting has been some of the hardest thing that the Lord's asked me to do. Waiting for answers, waiting for wanting to know when he was going to fix something or waiting for deliverance. But God is worth waiting for. And one of the verses that has helped me a lot is Psalm 27, when David said, I would have given up hope had I not believed I would see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. So one of the things we want to do when God asks us to wait is we want to wait with faith. We want to wait trusting that he's good and that he's got a good plan, and that even if it causes pain for a short while, it'll only be for a short while, and it's only if necessary, based on James. So waiting is hard, and waiting is Christianity. That is where we're at. So put on your seatbelt and get ready, because that's part of what we're doing and part of what you'll have to keep working on. And the more we do it, the more we wait and see God deliver, the more you're able to wait longer and see him deliver again. It's like your muscles get strengthened, your faith muscles get strengthened, the more we wait and then see him, his hand and his goodness. But, all right, let's go back to verse 4. He says, Behold, as for the proud one, his soul is not right within him, but the righteous will live by his faith. This verse, as you saw in your homework, is quoted 6 times in the New Testament. The righteous shall live by faith. It's a wonderful verse, and it explains so much, and yet it's something worth huge pondering. It's comparing 2 things. It's comparing the proud one, as it says in verse 4, and it says about that proud one, his soul is not right within him. And he said, but the contrast is the righteous, that one will live by his faith. Other translations in the Hebrew word has a sense of faithfulness, meaning he'll live by not a one-time belief, but he'll live, his life is known as constantly trusting and trusting and trusting again, and then trusting again, and then trusting again. And he's known by his faithfulness. I think of the passage in the New Testament where God says, when he comes back, will he find someone with faith? And I've many times been haunted by that verse of just saying, wow, if he comes back, will he find me trusting him? There's so many times that I fail in this, but we really want to strive. That's the key, is not perfection. It's just sort of interesting. The righteous one, that means the right one, the one that is accredited righteousness, that one lives by faith, by trusting and trusting again. And then you say, but Carol, you sin. I've seen you sin. Well, and if you haven't, trust me, I do. But the righteous one will go back to 1 John 1:9 and say, God, I'm confessing my sins. I'm faithful. You're faithful and just to forgive my sins. And they trust that their righteousness, their rightness, is given to them, credited to them through Jesus Christ. So I stand before God in a right standing because of what Jesus did. And how does that affect the way I live? How do you know I trusted that? Well, because the next situation that God says, Carol, are you going to wait on me, or are you going to not trust me? Ooh, man, I'm going to trust you, Lord, but this is hard. And he goes, okay, and then he waits for a little bit, and then he says, look, it was worth waiting for. And then I'm like, oh, yeah, you're right, Lord, I'm so glad. And then sometimes I fail. And I say, oh, Lord, I didn't trust you. I went ahead and did it my own way. And God says, do you see it? Do you see that you need my righteousness again, Carol? And I'm like, oh, yeah, I do, Lord. I tried to do something on my own terms, and I was wrong. And Lord, I see that I need you, because I still don't have the ability to do all right on my own. Sometimes faithfulness, as I describe it, it doesn't look pretty. I wish I could say to you that look at what I did. I trusted God here, and look at my life, and oh man, this is great. It usually doesn't look that way. It's usually more like, it's like Lord says to trust, and I'm like, okay, I'm trying, and man, Lord, this is hard, and I'm trying, there, and I'm just having a hard time and trusting, and it's like, Lord, I don't know if I'm trusting, and it's like, this is hard, and I don't understand why you're not here, and it's sort of like the Habbakuk cry, and it's like, okay, Lord, but just reprove me, tell me whatever I need to know, because I don't even understand. I'm just trying, I keep reading your word, I keep searching, and I don't look good, and I don't necessarily want to share with everyone that walk of faith, because it isn't neatly tied with a bow. But you know what? Over time, you start to realize at the end of it, you start to go, wow, I didn't lose my faith. I'm still holding on. I'm still trusting that He will deliver. He will deliver me. He will answer my prayers. He will come and deliver me, and I will see His goodness. And that just takes time. And God and us being faithful, keep trusting. It doesn't usually look pretty. But that's what God's looking for, is the righteous ones, the right ones. Our righteousness, because we're credited by God, His righteousness. And how do we know? Because we faithfully keep trusting Him as life goes on. Not necessarily pretty. Not necessarily what we want to say, hey, everybody, look at me, because it's not about me. It's because of Him. If you look at me, you'll be like, whoa, she's like not trusting at all. But if you look at what He does and how it's like, well, she's here again, she's here again. Sometimes when I, as a missionary, I travel to a lot of different churches, and I talk to a lot of different people, and I say something to them, and many times they look at me and they think, that is a funny thing to say. But when I haven't seen someone for a long time, and I see them in a church, and I'll say to them, you're still here. And to them, they'll be like, yeah, I'm still here. But to me, it's saying, you haven't left the faith yet. You haven't given up yet. You're still coming to church. You're still trying to follow the Lord. You're still here. That is faithfulness. Now they might say, well, my walk hasn't been that great. And I'm like, yeah, but you're still here. You're still searching. You're still seeking God. That's where we want to be found. The righteous ones will live by faith and faith and more faith and more faith. That's what that verse is about. But the proud ones, their hearts are not right within them. And now he's going to go into more. Let's go into verse 5. Furthermore, wine betrays the haughty man, that's the proud one, so that he does not stay at home. He enlarges his appetite like Sheol. He is like death, never satisfied. He also gathers himself all the nations and collects to himself all peoples. Well, wine betrays the haughty man, betrays the heart. Wine reveals and magnifies what's in your heart. It's like, it takes away all inhibition, and you just go ahead and say whatever you're thinking. And so he's saying that's exactly what a proud man is like. Is, you know what? It'll betray you. And you'll just all of a sudden start speaking and saying things. And it'll show that you're never satisfied. You're never satisfied with whatever God gives you. You're always looking for something more. And you're just taking and taking and taking, trying to be satisfied. But you never will be. And then verse 6, he says, will not all of these take up a taunt song against him, even mockery and insinuations against him? He's talking about, will not all of these are the ones that have been captured, that have been taken, that have been abused by this proud one. They're going to take a taunt song. They're going to, in my day, it was neener, 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 it's, they're going to take up a song against this proud one, against Babylon, and they're going to mock him and make insinuations about him. And let's read on. The second part of verse 6. It says, and they're going to say to him, and this is what the song's going to sound like, and they're going to say, woe. Now, woe means cursed. Cursed are you. And he's got 5 woes here. Now, this in Hebrew, most Hebrew has a chiasm that is, it's like it builds. So it's like you go from one end to here to the top and then down. So often, in English, I was always told you say the big idea and then you do the 3 supporting points and then you say your conclusion. Well, that's not normally how the Hebrew is written. It's more like you build up to this is your main idea and then you build down to support it. So you're supporting this big idea. So in these woes, you're going to find there's one and then there's another, and then here's the pinnacle, and then there's another, and then there's another. You're also going to find that the bottom 2 are horizontal, meaning they're with man to man, and then man to man, and then the last one is vertical, God to God. I mean, us to God, us to God. So let's look at them in a little more detail. And I'll just tell you right now, the top pinnacle starts with that woe in verse 12, but the big idea of the whole book of everything is verse 14. Verse 14, and we'll get there. So anyway, all right, so let's start with the woes. So this is the taunt song that they're going to say to him, Babylon, the proud man. This is what they're going to say. And say to him who increases what is not his, for how long, and makes himself rich with loans. The Babylonians forced others to loan them money for military campaigns. And they weren't going to give the money back, but they forced people to give them loans. And so woe to those who rob and fraud people and take what's not theirs, that God didn't give it to them. And they take it. And that's exactly what they did. And then it says in verse 7 and 8, will not your creditors rise up suddenly, and those who collect from you awaken? Indeed, will you not become plunder for them? Because you have looted many nations, and all the remainder of the peoples will loot you. The punishment fits the crime. You took from them, and ultimately they're going to take from you. And he says, because of the human bloodshed and violence done to the land, done to the town, and all its inhabitants. So he's saying, you proud one, and right now we'll just talk about the Babylonians. He says, you're taking what's not yours, and I didn't give it to you, and you took from them. You know what? At some point in time, this is the punishment. I'm going to let them take from you. So verse 9, here's the next woe. Woe to him who gets evil gain for his house, to put his nest on high, to be delivered from the hand of calamity. Well, woe to him who gets evil gain for his house. This is not like your house that you live in. It's more like a royal dynasty. It's like you're building, you have evil gain for the main kingdom, and you put your nest up high, you put your house up high, because you're trying to protect yourself from trouble that's coming. But you're actually gaining that safety by inflicting evil on others. So it's like, I want to be safe, so I'm going to take from you so that I can build a house up on high and all protected, and I'm just going to take from you to be able to do that. So that's the woe. Woe to gain safety by inflicting evil on others. Verse 10, you have devised a shameful thing on your house by cutting off many peoples. So you are sinning against yourself. Surely the stone will cry out from the wall, and the rafter will answer from the framework. They're going to turn on you, and punishment will fit the crime. Verse 12, Woe to him who builds a city with bloodshed and founds a town with violence. Is it, and this is your top thing here. Is it not indeed from the Lord of hosts that the peoples toil for fire and nations grow weary for nothing? The Lord of hosts, he's the one that gives and he's the one that takes away. And he's giving you something and you are doing it with bloodshed and violence. He was planning on giving it to you anyway. Let me see. Is Babylon going to be able to take Israel? Yep. Because he said, here you go. So the problem is that this proud one says, oh no, I've got to go in and I've got to kill everybody and I've got to wipe it out and I've got to do it in a horrible, mean way, because they don't understand that the Lord of hosts is there, that the Lord of hosts is the only way they can possibly succeed. And then it gives verse 14, and 14 is the key, the big picture of the whole history of time. It says, verse 14, for the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. Let me read that again. For the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the water covers the sea. See, woe to someone who thinks they can live without God. And they think they're getting things without God. And he says, I just want you to know that the earth is going to be covered with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord. It will happen. Everywhere. There'll be no one. Every knee is going to bow someday. We know that Christ is going to come back. We know that in Revelation 19. We know that we have that to look forward to. But I want to take us back to an interesting thing. I hope I don't lose you here. So hang with me and I hope you'll go aha like I did when I heard it. But maybe this will help you have an idea of what this verse means. Let's go back all the way to Genesis, right at the very beginning of your Bible. And in Genesis chapter 1, in creation, you know, in creation, in the first day, he said there was evening and morning, and well, let's go to Genesis chapter 1, verse 5. He says God called the light day and the darkness night, and there was evening and morning and one day. So he set the standard. The standard is evening and morning, and that's one day. And he saw that it was good. And then he said in verse 8, he called the expanse heaven. He created heavens and waters and things like that. And he said, verse 8, it says, and there was evening and morning a second day. And God said that was good. And then he created the land and all the plants. And look at verse 13. And there was evening and there was morning and there was a third day. Okay? And then he created the stars and the sun and the moon. And he saw that it was good. In verse 19 of chapter 1, he says there was evening and there was morning and a fourth day. And then he created, sun, moon, and stars. The word plants was on the third day. The fourth day he created the sun, moon, and stars. Sorry, I'm off on my, you'll have to read it again, but I want you to see something specific here. And verse 23, it says there was evening and there was morning and there was a fifth day. And then he created birds and ocean creatures. And in the fifth day, and he said that, and there was evening, morning, and the fifth day. And then on the sixth day, he created the animals and he created man. And look at verse 31. He said there was evening and morning and a sixth day. But something interesting happened. Then he said, on the seventh day, I want you to look at this very carefully. On chapter 2, thus the heavens and earth were completed, and all their hosts. And by the seventh day God completed his work which he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his works which he had done. And then God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because he rested from all his work which God had created and made. Do you notice what's not there? Well, hopefully you realize that I was saying there was evening and morning a first day, evening and morning a second day, evening and morning a third day, evening and morning all the way to 6 days. But the seventh day, he doesn't say that. He just said the seventh day he rested from all his work. Period. Doesn't say any more. Meaning it wasn't just an evening and morning. The seventh day was continuing many days, maybe years. I don't know. We don't know how long that seventh day of rest, that Sabbath of rest, how long that lasted. What we do know is this, that rest for God is not sleep. He wasn't tired. God doesn't get tired. He rested, but it has a sense in the Hebrew like sat and just enjoyed what he created. And he created Adam and Eve, and he enjoyed them, and they were enjoying him. And it talks about, how they woke up in the morning and they would spend time with him. They were exploring things. They might have done some work in the garden, but not for work's sake, for just enjoyment, to see something grow. I can imagine that time of just time with the Lord, of just enjoying his creation and saying, wow, look at these stars. Wow, look at these plants. And then going, wow, God, you're so awesome and so wonderful. And he would be constantly exploding their mind of how wonderful and everything that he had created and how wonderful he was. So that's the Sabbath. The Sabbath has a sense of more than one day, and it has a sense of just enjoying God, enjoying everything about him. Well, when we talk about the earth, and at that point in time, the earth was filled with his glory. Everything was screaming out, God, you're wonderful. And God, look at what you've created and how awesome you are and how much you care for the details and care for the big picture and care for our humor and care for everything. That's exactly what was going on in that Sabbath day. And I'm going to say days. Then Genesis 3. They chose to try to find something outside of God to give them more joy, that they could be equal to God, is what Eve did when she chose the fruit. Once she did that, it said that the earth was cursed, and the earth was cursed, and now man had to work to be able to eat. Man had to. There were so many things that were cursed, and I don't want to get into all that, but I'm going to take you to, this is the beginning before the fall, is this Sabbath time. Then there's something happened in the New Testament that was just sort of interesting to me. The Pharisees, if you can stay with me here for a little bit, if you remember the fight that they had with Jesus, more than not was always on about the Sabbath. It was like, you're breaking the Sabbath rule, you're breaking the Sabbath rule, you're breaking the Sabbath rule. And that was what they were fighting. And do you remember what his answer was? He always said this. He always said, I am the Lord of the Sabbath. I am the Lord of the Sabbath. They were trying to say, you're not the Lord of the Sabbath. We're the Lords of the Sabbath. We control it because we control the laws and we control the people and we tell them what they need to do. And we're in charge, not you, God. And God saying, I'm the Lord of the Sabbath. I'm the master of the Sabbath. God gave me everything. I created everything. They didn't see that. Well, now I'll get back to our Habbakuk time. it says that there's going to come a time when the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord. There's going to come a time, a Sabbath rest. But a Sabbath rest, not of sleep, but a Sabbath with the Lord of the Sabbath. Now, I just want you to think about this for a second. This day is going to be a day that lasts, and it's a day that when the earth is filled with the glory of God, it's going to be, yes, we'll be blown away with, he'll do stars and maybe he'll make them, I've been at Disneyland where they do a fireworks and songs at the same time, and it's amazing. It's amazing they can do this. Well, God's going to outdo anything anybody can do on earth. Anybody that can do something on a movie, he's going to outdo it all. And so, we're going to see amazing things. The heavens are going to declare the glory of God. They do now, but they're going to do it even more then. And the earth is going to declare the glory of God. And we're going to be declaring the glory of God. The whole earth is going to be filled with the glory of God. And the Lord of Sabbath, the best part, the Lord of the Sabbath, will be with us. He will know us, and we'll be known by him. Sort of like my husband talks about a time when he had an opportunity to meet a big professional basketball player in a social setting. And he went on to varsity, and he was with this brand new team, and they didn't know him at all. And that particular professional player happened to be playing that night. And he came by, and when he walked by him in the stands, he all of a sudden went, "Dave!" And all the guys were turned like, "How does he know you?" That is a little idea of what it's going to be like. We're going to be with the Lord of the Sabbath, who's going to do amazing things in front of us, just blow us away. But what's cool about it, the very best part, is that the Lord of the Sabbath is going to say, "I know you, and you know me." That's what's going to be amazing, is we're going to see the glory of the Lord, and he's going to know us. When every knee will bow, when every tongue confesses, even those that have rejected him and have insulted him and scoffed at him in every single way, they will bow, and they will know that he is the Lord. But to those who believed and trusted, it's like if every knee is bowing, and I can see myself bowing, but it's like, I feel like he'll come up and just tap you on the shoulder and say, "Hey, come with me. You're going to sit with me." It's going to be amazing. And it's not just one day. It's for eternity. So that's why this is such a critical verse. It says that the Lord of the Sabbath will return. We want to enter that rest. And he says the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord, and we'll see it. Boy, do you want to see it as an enemy, or do you want to see it as a brother? That's what it's saying here. Okay, sorry, I get carried away. But let's go on. That's the big idea of the whole book, is that day will come. Christ will come back. The Messiah is going to come back, and he's going to make everything right. And the glory of the Lord will fulfill everything and everywhere. All right, so verse 15. He says, we're now coming down on the other side. He says, "Woe to you who make your neighbors drink, who mix your venom even to make them drunk, so as to look on their nakedness. Woe to someone who exposes others' shameful behavior, and they seek to glorify themselves by demeaning others." Well, look what happens to them. Verse 16 and 17. "You will be filled with disgrace rather than honor. Now you yourselves will drink and expose your own nakedness. And the cup in the Lord's right hand will come around to you, and utter disgrace will come upon your glory. For the violence done in Lebanon will overwhelm you, and the devastation of its beasts will be by which you were terrified them, because of the human bloodshed and the violence done to the land, done to the town, and all its inhabitants. Oh, that's the same as verse 8. It ends the same way. That Lebanon, that God's going to, it's saying that the violence done to Lebanon, which is when they cut down, Lebanon had beautiful trees and was known for being beautiful. And they cut them all down. And they killed all the animals and killed the people. And they just devastated everything. They made the land have no beauty at all. And he's saying, woe to you, because you did this, you're going to be devastated. So, in verse 8, it talks about you looted, so they're going to loot you. And verse 17, it says, you devastated and you made them drink their shame. Well, guess what? You're going to drink God's wrath. The punishment fits the crime. Verse 18, what profit is there if an idol, when its makers carved it, or an image, a teacher of falsehood? For its maker trusts in its own handiwork, and when he fashions speechless idols, they're worthless, they're nothing. Now, we don't tend to do idols anymore, but we do understand the idea that when I take a tree and I cut it down and I carve out something, and then I fall down and worship it, that seems pretty stupid, because it's worthless. It has no ability to speak. And woe to him who says to the piece of wood, awake, to the dumb stone, arise. And that is your teacher. Behold, it is overlaid with gold and silver, but there's no breath in it at all. They seek wisdom from a rock or wood. Now, those of us that don't do physical idols, but we all have our own idols. Idols can be in different forms, not just rocks and not just wood, but it also can be in forms of anything that we want outside of God is an idol. So sometimes it can be in form of a husband. We can idolize our husband. And woe to them who say, husband, please tell me all wisdom. Give me all, where should I go? Where's my guidance? That can be an idol. Our idols could be our homes. Our idols could be our money. It's anything that you spend, and you think of how you spend your time and your money on. That's where you're going to start finding your idols in your life. And he says, woe to you when you trust in an idol, when you think that'll satisfy you, or that'll give you wisdom. He contrasts something here in verses 18, 19, and 20. 18 and 19, he's talking about trusting in idols. And they cry out to him, and they trust basically in their own strength, because they're trusting in their own wisdom, and it's worthless, and it's nothing, and it won't give them answers that they're looking for. But then in verse 20, he ends the whole chapter 2 with a really interesting contrast. He says, but the Lord, okay, now he's talking about those who trust in the Lord, he is in his holy temple. Let all the earth be silent before him. So you can trust in an idol that you cry out to. But if you trust in God, you're silent. That's sort of interesting. They're trusting in whatever their own words or their own thoughts are, right? When they're trusting in an idol. But when we trust in God, we're trusting in his character, and we're dependent on his grace, whatever he's going to give from his hand. And we're submissive to whatever his will is. Therefore, we're silent because we're dependent and we're just waiting upon him. And in this case, the source of all revelation that we're ever going to need is always present. we don't need to go seeking it somewhere else. He's given us everything we need. Well, I don't know about you, but sometimes I feel like he hasn't. I'm like, Lord, I need to know. Do I do this? Do I do that? Do I do this? Do I do that? God's given us everything we need to make the decisions. We'll some point in time do another study on how to know God's will. But the point is that God has given us everything we need for life and godliness here. We sometimes are wanting more because we're seeking an idol. We're seeking another satisfaction. But God is obviously telling us many times, just depend on me, trust me, submit to me, obey what I'm telling you. Just walk in the ways I'm telling you, and it'll all work out exactly how I want it to. That's what you need to be comforted in and strengthened. It's a little bit more of that weight, isn't it? When we trust in an idol, we scream out to it. It's interesting that just it comes up with worthless and nothing. There's nothing there. But when we're silent before the Lord and we know that He is going to deliver us, He's going to do what He needs to do, and we're okay with that because we know what He said He's going to do in the end, that we're going to see Him. So the end for the one that trusts in the idol is worthless and nothing and judgment. But the end for those that are trusting God is wonder and majesty and joy beyond anything I can possibly describe. And the Bible says we won't be disappointed in what we're given. So, chapter 2. What's the summary? Well, one thing I want you to know that's sort of interesting is those woes that I was talking about that apply to Babylon, because they were doing those. It's very interesting. They also apply very directly to Israel. That all of Israel's sin, woe to those who rob and fraud and take what God has not given them. That's what Israel is doing. They're robbing and frauding each other and taking from each other. Woe to them who gain by inflicting evil on others. Well, that's what Israel was doing. Woe to them who were founded on bloodshed and violence. Israel, that's why he was saying, I see violence all day long because people are, and they're succeeding with it. It's pride. Woe to them who seek to glorify themselves by demeaning others. He was saying they weren't getting justice. Woe to them who trust in idols. He was saying that's exactly what Israel was doing. They were trusting in things of this world. Israel, this applies very much to Israel. Yes, it applies to Babylon, but yes, it applies to Israel. The scary thing is also God is telling Habbakuk, don't be this proud one, Habbakuk. You are in danger of that. Your soul will not be right within you if you're there, if you're following any of these. And by the way, he's saying that to us too. That woe to us, we're in danger if we try to take what's not ours. If we inflict evil on others. If we have pride before God, we think we don't need Him. If we seek to glorify ourselves, look, God, look how good I am compared to those people. They aren't doing it. If we trust in anything here, we're in the same boat as all those woes. If you notice, he never said Babylon. He just said woe to him. And he talked about the proud one and the haughty man. And woe to them that do these things. Well, that is a danger for us. And we need to be cautious that we don't walk in a self-righteous way. That would be exactly what this is. So what's the conclusion of all this? Well, this chapter exposes that Babylon trusted in their own strength and their own wisdom, and it was going to lead to their destruction. Israel was trusting in their own strength and their own wisdom, and it led to their destruction. And Habbakuk was also trusting in his own wisdom, and if he didn't change, it would lead to death. But he had the opportunity to walk by faith. And us, the question is, are we going to trust in our own wisdom and say, God, this is what you need to do? Or are we going to say, Lord, I'll wait upon you. I'll wait silently. I'll trust you. I'll keep my faith even when I don't understand what's going on. I will keep trusting you, and I'll keep searching your scriptures and clinging to you. Even if I don't understand, and even if hard times come, I will cling. God instructs Habbakuk to live by faith, by faithfulness, to live a life walking by faith, trusting in God, seeking his wisdom. Faithfulness is the key. And he contrasts that with the proud one who will cry out for what? Their own way. That's what the proud one does. But in the end, we will all see the glory of God. It's just the proud one won't want to see it. And they'll want to hide, but they won't be allowed to, because the whole earth will be filled with the glory of God. But the righteous, those that are credited righteousness, his righteousness, won't be living in a perfect right way. But they will be the ones that will live silent, dependent on God. On, Lord, I'll just take whatever you give me. Submissive to his will. Wherever path you want, that's what I'll go, because I trust you in the end. Those ones, those righteous ones, they'll not be disappointed. And they're going to see his wonder. They're going to see the Lord of the Sabbath. They're going to see his majesty. They're going to see the earth filled with his glory. And they're going to see Christ himself. And he will know them. And he won't say, I don't know you. He'll say, I know you. He'll blow our minds. We will have more joy and wonder of things that we are craving for now. God saying, it's right there. Are you willing to wait? Well, I want to. And I need you to help me keep going. Because I too lose my way and stumble along the path. And it doesn't look pretty. But I need to keep being faithful. I need to keep seeking and keep trying. And the same thing with you. You need to keep trying to seek him, keep trying to understand him, keep being willing to wait for his deliverance and his timing. Oh, it's so worth it. The wonder and the joy that's set before us. The Lord of the Sabbath is his name. Jesus. He's coming back. And that's what we look forward to.